Lumpur. There is one question from Anna in the chat box. Dear Venerable, I try to be aware of breathing in and out about more than half a year. I still feel difficult to be aware of it naturally and easily. When I try to be aware of the breathing, I start to control it. If I try to control it, I feel hypoxia, headache, and dizziness. If I don't control the breathing, I cannot be aware of it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think everybody goes through this sort of experience, some more than others perhaps, but sometimes it seems easier not to meditate, doesn't it? Oh, this being mindful of the breath, it's difficult, it's challenging, makes you aware of your body, and you feel itches and aches and pains, and like you say, sometimes you try too hard and you actually feel nauseous or uncomfortable and so on. So it seems easier maybe just to not try meditating at all, not try being mindful at all. But of course, if you don't practice at all, your mind is basically left to your own habits and karma, and your stress tends to get worse and worse over time. So this is why the Buddha said you have to be patient as you practice. Kanti paramang tapo titika. Patient endurance is the highest austerity. It's the most useful quality. So as you are experiencing some of those reactions, you're trying to bring attention to the breath, but then your mind is maybe closing down too much on it, controlling it, fixing it onto it, and you feel uncomfortable. Don't give up, but just see if you can adjust your effort level as you're doing that. Try to learn from what you're doing. That's part of the practice of clear comprehension. You notice if you're holding on too tightly or forcing your mind to concentrate on a certain part of the body, or you're tensing up because you're trying to do it well, be a good meditator, and your desire for results is actually making you force the whole thing too much in an unnatural way. So there's these beautiful similes about the right effort, like if you're holding a baby duckling or a baby bird, say, excuse me, I've got something in my eye. You're holding a baby bird in your hand, and you want to put the other hand over to keep it there. For some reason, you have to keep this bird in your hand. If you push too hard down, you'll hurt the bird, you'll crush it. If your hands are too open, it will come out of your hands and get away. So you have to keep your hands at just the right amount, the right kind of effort, right tension to keep the bird there. The other one is if you have a leaf floating on the water, on a pond, and you take a very sharp knife like a surgeon's scalpel and you want to cut through this leaf. If your hand is too light, the effort you apply to cutting the leaf is too light, the knife won't go through the leaf, it just pushes it along the surface of the water. But if you try too hard and you force the knife down to cut through the leaf really hard, all you do is make the leaf sink, and you don't cut it either. To cut a leaf successfully that's floating on the surface of the water, you got your sharp knife, and you just have to apply the right amount of pressure so the blade goes through the leaf, cuts through it. And that takes practice, doesn't it? You need to learn what is the right level of pressure. Meditation is the same. You have to learn, so you have to give yourself the chance to learn by being patient, keep going, but then apply some wisdom to what you're doing, some paying attention and learning and observing. Where do I need to relax a bit if you are feeling tense or uncomfortable? Or if you're one who falls asleep, where do I need to increase my effort so that I'm not falling asleep? these are the things we have to learn, and that's what you're learning as part of your meditation. But you need to be patient with it to give yourself the chance to learn. So sometimes it's good to set very small little targets or goals for yourselves. Say, well, for a certain period of time, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever time, I'm not going to get up from my meditation spot. I'm going to stick with it and see what comes up and learn from it. Because sometimes when you set yourself, make a resolution to sit for a certain period of time, it makes you work through things rather than just give up or give in. Say you're feeling uncomfortable, so you change posture or just stop meditating. Well, you probably haven't learned that much then. But if you make yourself stick with the meditation and learn how to get through this problem, quite often you see a lot of the experiences we have are very temporary. Physical sensations in the body or certain states of mind where you're trying to control perhaps, you notice that things change over time because you stick with it. And you notice your mind maybe after 20 minutes or something, oh, it's changed, it's no longer doing that, or the uncomfortable feeling has passed. And often people find this as a kind of purification process. If you do that regularly, certain feelings, painful feelings, sensations, itches, certain habits of mind where you're trying to control too much, they fade and often they don't return. And you find little by little your meditation gets easier and your mind can go to a slightly deeper level of peace because of this patient effort that you've been developing and doing it regularly, learning from your practice. You get to the point, you're finding it's like a skill that you get better at calming down, and a lot of the obstacles seem to fade quite naturally. They don't return. But you have to give yourself that chance, be patient and work with it.
Sadhu Lumpur. We have another question here. I practice sitting and walking meditation regularly. In meditating, I acknowledge the thoughts that come in and go back to concentrating on the breath. How can I reduce my mind going away from the breath? Appreciate your advice.
Well, literally, don't let it go away from the breath. Keep it anchored there. Keep the breath in mind. So you have to learn what works for you. As I said, patient effort is probably a hugely important factor. Keep doing it. Keep bringing your attention back to wherever you are noticing the breath. So tip of the nostril or the chest or the abdomen. And keep teaching yourself to let go of everything else. The idea is if you keep putting your attention on the breath, everything else becomes less and less important to you. So first of all, at the very beginning of your meditation, you give yourself the permission to let go of everything else. Because often people are not really doing that. They're saying, I'm going to meditate and I'm going to solve all my problems and I've got to do this tomorrow and this, and then I'm going to do that, and what will I do with this and what will I do with that and this person and that issue. From the moment they start meditating, they're trying to solve their problems and work things out, whether it's to do with their body, their health, their work, their life. So already they've kind of gone off on the wrong foot. What you have to do is give yourself the right instruction. Say, I'm allowing myself at this time to let go of everything else. It's quite okay to let go, to relax, enjoy the breath, and let go of everything else. So you give yourself that permission. And then, of course, you repeat that through the meditation. So when you notice yourself thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow, once you realize, however long it takes, you say, no, this is not what I have to do now. I'm coming back to the breath. And what I'm going to do tomorrow is not important. I don't have to think about it now. I can let it go. So you have to find enjoyment in coming to the breath and letting go of everything else. That's partly just appreciating how good it is and why it's useful to you to do that. We need to let go. We need a holiday. We need to de-stress this mind. What I always say is, if the thing that you want to think about that's distracting you is really that important, when you finish your meditation, you go off to do other things, well, it will come up again and you can think about it then. But at this time, you can afford to let it go. And what you always find is, that thing that seems so important, taking your mind away from the breath, in the end, it's not that important. You're just being deluded. You're being tricked by your own mind, your own habits of mind, your own worries and anxieties. They come up and they trick you. So you have to be smarter than your old habits. The old-fashioned word is Mara. We say, this is Mara tricking you. Mara is like the tempter, the one who's trying to obstruct you from progressing in your meditation. So you could say it's a person, like a person, but it's just habits of mind. So you have to say, I know you, Mara. I know you, the trickster of the mind, throwing up, what you're going to do tomorrow, that plan, where you're going to go, who you're going to meet, what you have to do, and how bad your life is or how good your life is, and this and that. This is all just Mara tricking you, so you can afford to let it go. Basically, when you come to the point that you've made the breath really important, you'll naturally start letting go of everything else, because the breath is more important than everything else, so that's where your mind stays. Many people have a little sort of breakthrough when there's that time in their day. It may not be when they're meditating, but they're just pausing, sitting there, doing something, or doing not very much, and they're just sitting there, and quite naturally the mind comes to the breath. And then that's a little yes moment where you say, yeah, now the breath is actually becoming more important to me and I can turn to it quite naturally. Maybe not all the time, but sometimes. So that's a little moment to savor and say, this is a good sign. And then keep going, and that might happen more often. They ask, where did the Buddha put his mind when he didn't have any teaching to do and didn't have to organize the monks, the nuns, the monasteries, teaching the lay people? Where did he put his mind? Well, quite often he was just putting it on the breath, because that's a very pleasant place to be once you get used to it, once you've learned to let go. So remind yourself of that. The breath becomes more and more pleasant the more you do it.
Sadhu Lung Po. Next question. After trying to meditate, which makes my reaction to what happens around me react very slowly, even when facing emergency situations, and I always want to escape reality by meditating. How should I deal with this?
Well, balance. It's true, we develop equanimity, so those things that are not that important, that are not emergencies, it's fine to let them go. And to be a little bit more indifferent or, detached from things. You hear a sound that may normally annoy you, but now you just say, it's just a sound. Or some activity going on around you, it's just that activity, and you're not too bothered by it. And that's quite pleasant and that's quite useful to have. But of course, you still have to maintain alertness. If you're truly alert, you're mindful, clearly comprehending, well, if there is an emergency, either you're facing one or someone around you is facing one, well, yes, you should respond, shouldn't you? Because it's an emergency. I'm not sure what you've got in mind, but maybe it's a medical emergency or some kind of problem has arisen in your life or in your work or something. Well, sometimes we just have to set aside other things, including breath meditation, and go and deal with that emergency or that pressing situation. But that becomes your meditation. So if it's a medical emergency, you've got to help someone who's struggling in some way, well, that becomes your meditation, how to do that, how to help them, and your mindfulness should help in that situation. If it's true mindfulness, it's presence of mind what presence of mind does is it releases your intelligence, your wisdom faculty to function better. So you notice when you're mindful, maybe you're faced with a problem that you've never encountered before and you don't immediately know what to do, or you don't have any information how to deal with it, but you're mindful. And when you're present, then often the solution starts to emerge out of that situation because you're present in that situation. But you have to recognize an emergency or a situation that requires your attention when it happens. So yes, occasionally meditators do get it, I wouldn't say get it wrong, but you have that situation where you're so absorbed in your meditation you maybe miss something nearby. It does happen and you have to accept that. But it's not very often. Usually if you're alert and mindful, when the emergency happens, you're sensitive. So your ears, your eyes, your mind picks up on whatever that emergency is. That's my experience. And you adapt and you do what's needed in that situation. So sometimes it means stopping meditation, getting up and doing something. Okay, so be it. That's okay. So myself, I haven't really experienced where I turn off to the world so much that I miss out on some important emergency. Sometimes it's good to be a bit slow, isn't it? You're saying you're slow to react. Well, maybe that's a good thing, because sometimes we're too fast to react to things, and that's where a lot of our emotional suffering comes, doesn't it? You get angry quickly, or you get afraid quickly, or you have strong desire take over your mind very quickly, and that's where a lot of suffering comes from. So if you're a bit slower, that may give you enough time to pause and assess what's going on here, what do I need to do, whether it's to do with other people or yourself or some situation. The pause, the slowness can be used to help be cautious. Obviously some situations require quick response, quick, get out of there if there's danger or something, there's that as well. But sometimes being a little bit slow can give you the space to make a good decision or really assess what's going on. So being slow isn't always a problem.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question here. Luang Por, recently I caught a glimpse of a TV program. The mind immediately lost its mindfulness when I started to be attracted to the characters and story plot. How can one maintain mindfulness while watching a performance, yet not attached to the sense impressions?
Well, don't do it too often, because the more you do it, the more your mind will get used to just indulging in the story on the screen. I mean, that's why entertainment sells so well, because we love to get lost in the imagination and the story on the screen, because at that moment we forget our body, we forget our other problems and worries, and so we get a release. And it can be enjoyable, delightful for a while, but of course at the end of it your mindfulness usually has gone completely. Maybe even your intelligence is not functioning that well. You kind of get lost in the screenplay and the events on the screen, and of course your problems are still there. So it's not encouraged. If you do anything, if you are watching TV or reading a novel or something, try and use wisdom to see what's going on. One, to recognize, well, this is just a play, just a fiction on the screen or on the page. And you may be able to learn some wisdom from it. What are these people doing? Are they keeping precepts? And look how happy they are because they keep the precepts, or more often than not, they're not keeping the precepts because that's entertainment. So they're doing things maybe that are unskillful, unwholesome, and you see them getting into trouble and you say, oh, look, they're getting into trouble because they're not keeping the precepts. They're getting drunk, or they're fighting, or they're stealing, and it may be exciting and trigger various emotions, but it also leads to suffering. So maybe you can learn something in this way, the suffering of unwholesome behavior and the consequences of it, Or when you see somebody helping another person, they sacrifice to help another person, you say, oh, that's really good, yeah, I should do more of that in my life. It's a good thing to help others. Maybe you can learn some simple Dhamma from these things. But like you say, the most likely consequence is your mindfulness slips and you get lost into the screen and the story. And then, to re-establish mindfulness is harder because you filled your mind with a lot of sense impressions. So be warned, be careful, maybe limit the amount of movies and entertainments, games, video games, things you read, all of that genre, you might limit it a little bit because it will actually be counterproductive in training in mindfulness. You have to experiment with this, find out for yourself.
Sadhu Luang Por. Faye, if you are still there, we saw you had raised your hand. It's your turn to ask if you would still like to unmute and ask your question to Luang Por.
Hi, Luang Por, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Right, hi. Thank you for the teachings. So, talking about inner mental chatter earlier during a Dhamma talk. So I've been having a daily meditation practice for a while now. And what I found to be extremely beneficial is that it helps you or nudges you to be more mindful through the day. And as I get more mindful through the day, I'm also now starting to pay a lot more notice or attention to my own inner mental chatter. And what I hear often, it comes back to the theme of conceit, or them being a lot better than me, or I should beat them at something. Oh no, but I can't. It all comes down to really silly things like that. And when I sort of reassess, whether that sense of conceit has lessened over, say from a year ago, I don't think it has. So I'm not sure whether there is a particular practice that is, that's specific for conceit, apart from just a normal sitting.
The whole of the Buddhist path is for dealing with conceit. One thing to remember, that there's very coarse kind of obvious conceit, and then there's very refined, subtle conceit, and only the Arahant has completely abandoned conceit. So, you have to accept that fact. It's going to be with you for a while. But what we're working on, first of all, is the worst excesses of our conceit that lead us maybe to hurt other people or hurt ourselves. So the first practice for dealing with conceit is precepts. When you have sense of self come up and you're comparing to someone, like you say, they're better than me, maybe you get some jealousy or some dissatisfaction with this other person who seems to always be better than me, or they're worse than me and I'm better than them. Of course, those thoughts come up, and they come up very quickly and automatically, but maybe use the precepts so you don't actually go and do something based on those kinds of conceited views that come up in your mind. So you're not going to take advantage of someone who you might see as worse than you because you think you're smarter than them. Maybe you can manipulate them or hurt them in some way or take advantage of them in some way. That would be where you would use your precepts to restrain your worst excesses of your conceit. Or you're angry, well, that's mixed up with conceit as well. And maybe someone else looks down on you, and I have inferiority of conceit, and they seem to be very arrogant and condescending towards me, and I'm so angry, I just want to say something to them or throttle them or do something. So that would be where you use the precepts, first of all, to restrain your conceit so it doesn't lead you into unskillful ways. When you're practicing the precepts regularly, it makes you mindful, because it makes you mindful of the intentions lying behind your speech, your actions, And then you can investigate the very conceit that may be making you want to say or do something unskillful. Or it could be turned on yourself. Sometimes we have conceit that leads to sort of feelings of, I'm hopeless, I'm no good. And we do things that kind of reinforce that because we're stuck in that view of ourselves. So again, catch these behaviors, mental behaviors, before they come out in speech or action, and start to use some mindfulness and investigate and maybe say, well, it's just a thought. That person, maybe there's things about them that I don't know. Maybe they have good qualities, have bad qualities, or, it's an incident. Somebody has looked down on you, been rude to you, or arrogant, condescending to you. It's not a good thing. But you may reflect, once you're reflecting with mindfulness, you say, well, this is their karma. That's not good for them, because it's going to be, maybe it's their blind spot and it will cause them suffering in the future. Or you might come back and look and say, well, do I do that? Can I be that arrogant, that conceited towards other people? And if you can see you can do it sometimes, then you have a bit more understanding of the person who's doing it to you. And you maybe, your own conceit starts to fade because you realize, they have it, I have it, this is all coming from delusion. This is something I'm going to have to let go of. There's many approaches, but the first thing is try to establish the precepts to guard your speech, your actions, so you don't do things that are harmful. And then the next step might be to observe conceit arising, passing away, observe the suffering that comes from when you hold on to conceit and views. See if you can establish enough mindfulness to let go.
Thank you, Luang Por.
We have another question here, Luang Por. How to rebuild self-confidence after trauma?
Patience, loving kindness, compassion. Obviously, all the qualities we talk about regularly, mindfulness, investigation of the truth, but particularly patience, kindness, compassion. Because trauma is, I assume, some kind of quite strong experience of suffering. So when you suffer, your mind is shaken. It shakes, maybe many times, it's shaken. Therefore your life is kind of shaken. So you're finding ways to just calm down and stabilize things after this experience where you're shaken. So whatever works to do that, particularly focusing on the themes of kindness, compassion, sense of acceptance of what's happened, but then moving on. So focusing more on creating good things, focusing on the positive rather than the unpleasant negative things that have already happened. You still have those memories, but just know they're just memories now. Now is the time to move on, rather than carrying them around and always reacting in the same old way. To try and have enough mindfulness when the memories come up and maybe accumulated unpleasant feelings associated with those memories that come up. Try and teach yourself that this is something that's in the past. It's a memory. Now is the time I can let go of it. And again, you're getting to the point where you can allow yourself to let go of the past and the various habitual reactions that might keep coming up. Part of the way we let go is focusing on the good. So cultivating kindness, compassion. I'm not sure what the particular trauma is, so I can't go into much detail, but basically you're trying to see it as something that can be let go of and that we can move on to something better.
Sadhu Luang Por. We have another question. Dear Ajahn, how do people with strong kanti differ from people with weak kanti in terms of skillful thinking? How does their thinking allow them to forbear difficulties or prevent them from being tricked by the kilesas?
Practice. And you made a good point. And one thing when we talk about khanti or endurance, patience, it's a wholesome quality of mind, which is why the Buddha encouraged us to develop it. So it's not simply gritting your teeth when you are facing some suffering, some pain, some trauma, some difficulty, and, hating yourself, hating the world, but just sitting there saying, I'm going to stick through this. And of course, hatred, anger, anguish, different kinds of stress may arise. But the idea with patience is you're keeping your mind in a wholesome state, even when you're facing pain, suffering of different sorts. And that takes practice. So you start small and you build up. You start with small moments of patience and maybe recognize the value of it, and then you build up your strength of character, your strength of mind, your ability to be resolved, determined to stick with something. But also the wisdom part is recognizing I'm going to keep a good state of mind. I don't want to let mental defilements come in even when I am experiencing some pain or some suffering. I want to keep my mind in a wholesome state. So you sort of set that goal and you keep working towards it. And it may take time. So, patience is not something you just have and that's it, fixed. It's like something that's constantly tested, you're constantly returning to. So you may have moments where you lose your patience, fair enough. You have a moment where you give in to anguish or you give in to despair. But then you return to saying, no, I've got to be patient through this, and you have to find a way to return to the wholesome state of patience, even though you're facing difficulty. And you work with that, you build up. So it might be simply sitting like this, sitting meditation for a period of time. So you can sit for 15 minutes, then the pain comes and you're going to be restless or bored. So then you say, well, today I normally can sit for 15 minutes. Today I'm going to sit for 30 minutes. I'm not going to stop at 15 minutes. I'm going to carry on. And as soon as you say that, the mind starts throwing up all kinds of obstacles, desires, frustrations, all kinds of things. But you've made this plan now, and you're going to stick to it. And so you're cultivating the quality of patience. And you see what you need to do to maintain your patient effort through whatever the mind throws up. Could be physical pain, could be mental distraction, different moods come up. But you try and maintain patience. So obviously goodwill is very closely related to patience, metta, mindfulness, these other qualities. In the end, they all work together. It's not like there's just one quality in your mind and nothing else. These different skillful qualities you cultivate together. But often patience helps to nourish the other qualities and allow them to come up, because it's like you're sticking with something, you're not giving up. A very good example is when people they're meditating and they want to stop. They say, oh, I'm just too tired, or too much pain in my legs, I'm too bored or too distracted, too sleepy. And they want to give up, but then at that moment they catch themselves and say, no, I'm going to be patient with this and work with this. I'm not going to stop. And sometimes it's as simple as saying, I'm not going to quit, or I'm not going to stop. And they carry on. And often that's when they get a breakthrough, when you don't give in at the moment you want to give in, but you don't give in. And that could be in many situations. It could be more in the sense of dana, helping somebody, serving people or helping other people, whether it's an individual or a community. You want to quit, you want to give up, but you make yourself carry on. And often you learn many good things at that time. Or it could be during an individual meditation sit, or it could be with precepts. Precepts and patience are very closely linked. So, you're frustrated in a situation, somebody has done something that hurt you or damaged your interests in some way, and you are fuming, you're in a rage. but you don't give in to your rage because of your keenness to practice. You say, I'm going to be patient with this, even though I'm fuming, I'm not going to say anything or do anything. I'm going to carry on practicing with this, rather than give in to the easy way is to let off steam and be angry, and maybe later we regret it. The hard way is that I'm going to be patient with this, and we have to work with our own emotions at that time where someone else has done something to really hurt us. And sometimes it's a situation, it's not a particular person, it may just be an unpleasant situation. The idea is you catch yourself and use the precepts partly to develop patience, and patience help you keep the precepts in that situation. Or it could be something you really like. Maybe you're married and you meet the man or the girl of your dreams and they're not your partner. So it's like, no, I'm not going to give in to that thought. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to say it. That's patience as well. So it works with desire for things, works with anger. There are different situations where we could go one way and follow the way of the unskillful, the unwholesome. Or we can say, I'm going to be patient with my own desires, my own emotions in this situation. I'm not going to go that way. So it's recognizing when you need patience is also important. That you might say that is wisdom.
Sadhu Luang Por. And next question is, would metta meditation help with conceit?
Of course. That's one way to deal with conceit, especially the kind of coarser kind of conceit. You may encounter somebody who brings up a strong sense of self in you, that you feel superior to them or you feel inferior to them, but then you develop metta, so you see something you have in common with them. Maybe they do have a certain superiority to you in some way, or they're a certain inferiority to you. But metta takes your mind in a different direction, doesn't it? You're saying, oh, this is a human being, I wish them well. Maybe they're superior to you, you wish them well. Okay, they're getting on better than me, or they're in a position of power over me, or they may be hurting me. Maybe you bring up, from your metta, you bring up compassion, because you realize they're actually hurting themselves through their actions. Or you meet somebody you look down on, and you think, oh, this person, I really look down on them. They're such a hopeless person. But then you bring up the metta to change your conceit into something more beneficial. So you have compassion, kindness, and this applies to yourself as well. When you're looking down on yourself, or you're looking up on yourself and you think you're superior to the world, we'll bring up the metta. And it's a great leveler of people, so it does have a good effect on conceit. Maybe not the most subtlest sense of self or conceit, but at least the more obvious kinds of conceit that come out. When you practice metta, it takes away the sharp edges of conceit, and you can be with people who bring up this sense of self in us, but we meet it with metta, with goodwill. And so the sharp edges, the rough edges of our conceit are taken off by that. Maybe you're in a situation where you're at work, or in a situation where you think, oh, I deserve better. Your conceit comes up, I deserve better. So you're starting to take advantage of others. But then the metta, you bring that up and say, no, I'm going to make myself help them or do something for them, rather than follow my original thought, which was, I deserve the best, I require the best here. You maybe say, well, I'll take second best and help them. So you cultivate metta, and that's also reducing your conceit. You have to explore with this. As you practice metta, see how it affects the sense of self, and how you can use it as a tool to reduce conceit.
Sadhu Luang Por. There is one more question. In meditation, if the inside of the body is seen, how does one continue meditation of the elements? Well,
for example, say you are focusing on the bones for example. The bones, the most prominent element in the bones is this earth element. So, I mean, in the beginning, just think it through. What happens to human bones or animal bones if somebody dies, they get buried in the ground? What happens? Well, the bones are one of the last bits to disappear because they're the more solid bit, earth element. But they're still breaking down into dust, into earth all the time, and eventually those bones will become earth. So this earth that we're walking on or sitting on, wherever you are in this world, is full of bones of other people. You might not see it or recognize it, but earth is partly made up of bones and other bits, hair and skin and things. So first of all, you're just thinking it through, reflecting on it, saying, oh, this human body goes back to the earth, a large part of it. Some of it goes to the air, some to the liquid, but a large part goes to the earth. Where is the person or the being in the earth? There's no person in the earth. The earth is earth. It's an element. It's part of nature. So you're just thinking it through first. But maybe as your mind becomes more one-pointed and the hindrances drop away, then you're just knowing that body part, say the bones. Maybe you focus on the solidity of the bones. So it may be a visual thing until you're seeing the bones as earth. You're still awake, you're still this human being, but you're now, the perception of the bones, for example, as earth becomes very clear to you, very strong, your mind becomes one-pointed on the earth element. And if you really take it as a meditation, then you may be seeing the earth element or focusing your mind on the earth element all the time. That perception becomes very strong. So of course it helps to dispel the perception of this person with a name and a personality and all the kind of superficial stuff that we associate with who we are. Now it's just a pile of earth. I'm just a pile of earth. You're just a pile of earth. Where's the person in that? And, meditators do sometimes have these kind of experience, deep insight, where they just recognize people as just a pile of earth. And the other elements can be the same, a pool of water, gas, air, heat, temperature. You're taking away the sense of a being, a person, a self, who you like or dislike, and you're bringing your mind to this equanimity. So there's that great story of Sariputta when he was being harangued by another monk who unfairly accused him of being conceited, proud, arrogant, because Sariputta walked past him and his robe brushed on him. So he said, oh, he almost knocked me over. Oh, he's being so aggressive to me, because his little bit of cotton just brushed against the side of his body, because this other monk had great sense of self, conceit, jealous of Sariputta. Obviously this other monk is not enlightened. He's still got a lot of mental defilements. So he didn't like the fact Sariputta walked past him and brushed his robe brushed on him. So he said, oh, he almost knocked me over. So the Buddha said, oh, Sariputta, what's in your mind? You got some aversion towards this monk? And then the Buddha and Sariputta answers, no. This is, my mind is like the earth. They criticize me, they're rude, aggressive to me, they praise me, they love me. My mind stays even like the earth. Because literally he's seen this body as elements, the earth element. Because if you see the body as elements, that sense of a self, pride, conceit fades away. So he obviously wasn't being aggressive or arrogant towards this other monk. It's just, unfortunate that his robe brushed up against him. Probably somebody else would be really happy. Oh, his robe brushed against me. The great arahant's robe brushed against me, and be very happy. But this other monk was full of jealousy and anguish, so he made a big deal out of it. That's what conceit does to us, doesn't it? It makes a big deal out of things. You keep thinking about it. He walked past me, he brushed his robe on me, what a terrible monk, he shouldn't have done that, blah, 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 blah. That's what conceit does. But when you see the elements, it's the opposite. Your mind goes calm, quiet, detached, like the earth. You think, what do we do to this earth? We throw rubbish on it, we spit on it, we urinate on it, we do all kinds of things on this earth, but the earth never complains because the earth has no conceit. So if you can see the earth element in yourself, then the mind is free from conceit. Just focus on it first. Focus on the aspect of the hardness of different body parts to the point where you see these are just earth element. They're just a hard elements. We give it a name. The earth element we call patawi, or the bones we call ati, but they're just bones. They're just earth, hard earth element, and there's no person in that.
Sadhu Luang Por. That may be the last question, unless anyone else has any further questions. Otherwise, we may end the session there.